Good morning and welcome to the USDA listening session for the Farm Labor Stabilization and Protection Pilot Grant Program. We are glad that you are joining us today. First, I want to inform you of some special accommodations available for those who need it. For those requiring ASL interpretation, we do have closed captioning available. For Spanish translation, it is available through the Zoom platform by pressing the interpretation button on the toolbar below and selecting Spanish. This webinar session is being recorded, and a link to the webinar recording will be made available in the days following the broadcast to all registrants and posted on our website, www.fsa.usda.gov/farm workers. We also encourage that all comments, including comments provided today in the listening session, be provided in writing in the notice on the Federal Register via the Federal Rulemaking portal. Please submit your written comments to www.regulations.gov/FSA 2022-2-0013-0001, and we will be sure to put that link in the chat so you have that. Also, the links to the website and the Federal Register will be added to the chat as well. I'd like to first introduce myself. My name is Dana Rogie. I am Farm Service Agency's Acting National Program Manager for Outreach. Joining me later in this session will be Linda Cronin, who is our Director for FSA's Outreach Office. We have a jam-packed agenda for today's event. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ann Kanapke, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy in the Office of the Secretary, who will provide opening remarks and discuss the Farm Labor Stabilization and Protection Pilot Grant Program. Ann?
Thank you, Dana. And thank you to all of you for taking time today to provide input as we look to design this pilot program. Food and agriculture industries contribute nearly $7 trillion to the U.S. economy, accounting for nearly 1/5 of all economic activity. These industries, we know that the key to the success of these industries is millions of farm workers. The COVID-19 pandemic put a spotlight on the importance of these workers and their contributions to our nation's food security, and simultaneously highlighted challenges of labor instability, irregular migration, and the need for increased labor protections in order to increase the resiliency of our food system and supply chain. Secretary Vilsack has met with farmers and ranchers across the country who struggle with the uncertainty of having a stable labor workforce from harvest to harvest. This kind of instability jeopardizes our farmers' ability to be competitive, puts in question the security of our food supply, and has repercussions on our overall economy. When the COVID-19 pandemic first struck, we were given a wake-up call regarding farm workers. They were deemed essential employees, and the pandemic put a spotlight on the importance of this workforce and the contributions to our nation's food security. They work every day in fruit orchards and dairy farms in the blazing heat and the freezing cold to ensure families have food on their tables. The Biden-Harris administration continues to take bold actions to address the challenges of today to ensure we provide food, fiber, and fuel for our nation and the world. We're committed to improving the resiliency of our food and agriculture supply chain, and to accomplish this, we need to address labor shortages in agriculture. This is something that I know folks who are participating today know all too well, and we look forward to hearing your stories. We're going to leverage resources provided through the American Rescue Plan in coordination with other federal agencies to develop this pilot program. It's going to provide support for agricultural employers. We're going to implement ensure the implementation of robust health and safety standards to promote a safe, healthy working environment for our U.S. workers and workers hired from Northern Central America through the seasonal H-2A visa program. I think with that, I just want to acknowledge it's important to have you all here today as we work to design this program. We look very forward to hearing your feedback, not only through this verbal listening session, but through the request for information. Our door is open as we go through this process of policy design, And we know that a successful program must be successful for the employers we're trying to reach. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ria Mehta, our Chief of Staff in the Farm Service Agency, to give a bit more information. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne, and thanks everyone for being here today. It's good to see such a full Zoom room. As Anne mentioned, I'm Chief of Staff at USDA's Farm Service Agency, and the Farm Service Agency really looks forward to facilitating these listening sessions and also standing up the pilot grant program. For those of you who don't know, FSA has 2,100 state and county offices across our nation, and those offices interface with producers, many of your members, day in and day out. They hear directly from our producers and our ag employers about their labor challenges. So we're really excited as an agency to be able to help stand up this program and starting with these listening sessions today. Information gained today at the listening sessions and via the written comment to the Federal Register and other stakeholder engagement opportunities are critical, and we intend for these communications to guide program development. So thank you for being here today. Thank you to those of you who will participate in the written comments as well. We anticipate that after collecting these comments, we will be in an intense program development phase, and we are aiming to launch the program in the spring of 2023. So again, thanks for being here today, and I will turn it back to you, Dana.
All right, thank you, Anne and Ria, for those comments. So we're going to start off with a few housekeeping items as we start the listening session. First, to reduce background noise and distractions, your microphone has been muted and your cameras will be turned off. We do ask that you ensure your name appears exactly how you registered on the screen to allow both me as the moderator and our note takers to be able to find you when called to speak. If you need to change your name, find your name in the participant list and hover over it. You can hit more and then rename to change your name as applicable. You have the option to activate closed captioning to appear along the bottom of your monitor by pressing the live transcript option. This is a listening session, therefore the chat box will not be used to answer any questions. We will be using it to provide links to the websites, as you can see, that are already there. We have them for the Federal Register, the Federal e-rulemaking portal, where the written comments should be submitted. Additionally, the use of any multimedia, PowerPoints, or other visual aids by the registered speakers is not allowed. They are only oral comments for today. We want to emphasize that all of the comments, including those that are expressed today, be made in the federal e-rulemaking portal. Again, that is www.regulations.gov/FSA 2022-0013-0001. And again, that is in the chat. Those written comments will be accepted through October 24th, 2022. Attendees selected to speak to the USDA officials will have 5 minutes to present. Our host will locate your name within the attendee list, and we will give you a heads up when it's your turn to speak, as well as the next 2 speakers, so everybody has a chance to be ready. When it's your turn, you will see a prompt on your computer sent by the host asking you to unmute your microphone and to activate your video feed. Please do both. Your video feed will appear spotlighted on the screen. And when I or my colleague, Linda, the co-moderator, introduces you, please activate your microphone and camera. Your time will begin at that point. As the moderator, I will remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining by coming back on camera. When your allotted time to speak expires, I will turn on my microphone to remind you to conclude your remarks. Should your comments surpass 10 seconds, your microphone will be muted and your video feed turned off. When your camera and microphone are on, please start by stating your name and affiliation and then proceed with your comment. Okay, I think we're just about ready to get started. We're going to pull up these questions. Just as you make your remarks, please keep in mind these questions. For our audience today, we are talking about ag employers. So what barriers and challenges do agricultural employers currently face in accessing the H-2A visa program? What specific barriers and challenges do agricultural employees face in hiring workers from Northern Central America? Do agricultural employers have specific feedback on the housing components of the H-2A visa program? And what challenges do you face related to housing? What incentives are employers seeking from USDA to improve their ability to hire workers from Northern Central American countries under the seasonal H-2A visa program? What enhanced worker protections and labor standards are employers willing to accept in order to receive USDA support to stabilize the workforce, including what mechanisms would be helpful in achieving these enhanced protections and standards? And what suggestions do you have to help ensure compliance for any additional standards required by recipients of grants as part of this Farm Labor Stabilization and Protection Pilot Grant Program? All right, and with that, we are now going to open up the comment period with our first speaker, who will be James Bingham. On deck, we have Chad Carlson, and after that will be Leah Cohen. So we'll go on and get started. Kaylee, do we have James on today?
I am not finding James in our participant list right now.
All right.
The next one is?
The next one is Chad Carlson.
Neither.
Okay, how about Leah Cohen?
Let's see. No.
I am here.
Leah, yes, go ahead, Leah. I'll start your time now if you want to start with introducing yourself and your organization.
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Leah Cohen, and I'm here representing the Agricultural Justice Project, which is a longstanding coalition of farmers and farm workers in the U.S. The program, guest worker programs like the H-2A program that tie workers to employers, separate them from their families, and treat them like agricultural inputs rather than humans. They use discriminatory recruiting practices, displace workers that are already here, and long-term members of their communities. So we urge you to replace guest worker programs like this with long-term commitment to building a domestic workforce for farms to elevate farm work to the high level it deserves due to the importance of food in human life. Such programs as the H-2A program that create a captive and disempowered labor pool are not the answer. We also urge you to end exemptions to the Fair Labor Standards Act protections so that they can be paid overtime and holiday pay and be granted the right to freedom of association. We encourage you to ensure hazard pay for farm workers having to work during storms and forest fires and hazardous conditions. Ensure enforcement mechanisms for workplace protections for farm workers for heat and heat exposure. We also encourage you to ensure minimum and living wages for farm workers that reflect the value they contribute to the economy and our sustenance without loopholes for small farms, because we need to reinvest in small scale agriculture and dismantle consolidation. We would also encourage you to provide a short and easily accessible pathway to citizenship for all undocumented farm workers and their families, if they so choose, thereby eliminating one of the major structural mechanisms that facilitates exploitation, abuse, and inhumane working conditions and living conditions for farm workers. We urge you to eliminate the mandatory verify for farms, which serves as a control and scare tactic in an immigration and trade policy system that strategically created a large population of undocumented immigrant workers to ensure an exploitable labor pool. And finally, we encourage you to fund programs that facilitate and incentivize authentically local community and family scale farms moving away from seeking cheap and captive labor and towards being able to thrive as a farm business while providing decent.
Our next speaker will be Dan Fazio. Following him will be Hector Freedom Gerardo. And after that, John Hawley, just so everybody is set to go when it is your turn. Dan? Do we have Dan on today, Kaylee?
I don't see Dan Fazio nor Hector Gerardo, but I do see John Hawley, so I will ask him.
Okay, great.
Except he just went away. Let's go to the next.
Okay, so then that would be Sarah James Ugortez or Ugoretz.
Yep, that's perfect. I'm here.
Okay.
All right.
All right,
Thank you.
Sarah, you are on the clock.
All right, great. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Sarah James Ugoretz, and I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. I work for Fair Share CSA Coalition, where I manage a registered apprenticeship that trains organic vegetable farm managers. And I'm happy to provide comments mainly on the question of just broad challenges that agricultural employers face in securing a stable workforce, not necessarily directly tied to the guest worker program. So what my colleagues and I have seen specifically in our upper Midwest region is a strong interest amongst farmers in building their labor management and human resources skills. So in our region, farmers are typically employing hired non-family labor, and that labor has come to play a crucial role in the long-term sustainability of their farm businesses. So though farmers are experts in production, what we have found and what many folks have told us is that they don't necessarily feel like they have those strong management and HR skills, which are so important when it comes to supporting their workers and to building a professional work environment in this fairly demanding industry. And then through my own research as a PhD candidate, focusing on creating positive labor experiences in organic vegetable production, it is abundantly clear that farm employees are looking for those factors as well when they consider farm employment opportunities. So, as we know that farmers are struggling to attract and retain employees, and that has just continued to intensify. So we found that there's a real opportunity in training farmers to be excellent employers. So to begin addressing this, Fair Share, we've worked with a group of farmers to create a peer-to-peer labor management training program that supports farmers in building these skills and has created basically a community of practice so that they can continue to support and learn from one another. So those training sessions cover topics ranging from emotional intelligence and farm culture to more concrete things like hiring and onboarding, building workers' autonomy, addressing conflict, and so on. All of those key things that really do contribute to an organized and professional work environment. And the feedback that we've heard from farmers who have participated so far just reiterates the need for and the interest in this type of support. and how these skills can ultimately contribute to building a work environment where farm employees are motivated to stay year to year and to return to. In our region, production is fairly seasonal. And then just as a closing comment, we are also experiencing a rising interest in amongst farm owners in the use of temporary guest workers because of how unstable the local labor market has come to be. And so a major concern of ours, of course, is just the great potential for worker exploitation within the current structure of the H2A program. And farmers may or may not be aware of that. So we're attempting to address that by creating new training sessions that really help farmers become ethical H2A employers if they choose to go that route. So I think investing in education, if the H2A program continues to exist, and raising farmers' awareness of how they can really be advocates for their employers for their employees that they work with through the H2A program. And really how they can create a welcoming and safe environment for those guest workers on their farms. All right, and that's what I have to share. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Our next speaker in the lineup is Crystal Jensen. Kaylee, do we have Crystal on? All right, I see her. Okay, go ahead. You are on the clock.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to take a couple minutes during the meeting today. My name is Cristel. I work with the California Institute for Rural Studies. We are an independent institute that focuses on community-driven research, meaning that our main focus is to give the mic and pass power to communities. And in this case, our main focus are farm workers and undocumented communities. So I just would like to provide a little bit more context on the current situation and the current structure, at least here in California and specifically the Central Valley, and on how H2A workers and the H2A program is being used as a tool to displace communities already established and workers already established, workers organizing and demanding workers' rights and a more sustainable, more safe working environment. So as part of the pilot program, and I have some questions. I don't know if there's going to be a point for the audience or participants to also ask questions as part of the presentation. But I will be really interested in learning how or what programs, what agencies are going to be focused on protecting and listening to workers' voices so that we don't fall into the same pattern of a bracero program, which the way that the currently H2A program is structured is pretty much heading in the same direction. So from the workers' perspective, it's very clear that farm workers deserve better working conditions, deserve a safe working environment, deserve, and they have the right to also organize to demand their working rights. And it is very, very concerning to me that as of right now, we're thinking about expanding, programs such as H2A without really looking into the details and the realities that farm workers are currently living in their working spaces and work environments. And we are focusing on the perspective of farmers and the shortage that currently exists in agriculture, mainly because there is a big reason for it. And I would say that moving beyond trainings, moving beyond increasing, working capacity, there needs to be a focus on expanding workers' protections, particularly for undocumented farm workers, for indigenous farm workers. So for those who may have like a little bit more questions and will be interested in learning more about the work that we've been doing, the organization California Institute for Rural Studies has been doing in collaboration with a big collective of different farm worker-led organizations across Oregon, Washington, and California. I can drop the link to the COVID-19 farm worker study, which wrapped up recently, and also the indigenous study, which shows very clearly what are the challenges that indigenous farm workers faced on a daily basis, and how the agencies that are supposed to be taking care of their safety are definitely lacking on action. So with that, I would like to wrap my comment and pass it to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you so much for those comments. Kaylee, up next we have Michael Marsh, and then Jerry from Rock Hill Honeybee Farms. You are on deck. Kaylee, do we have Michael? Oh, I see you now. And you may begin.
Good morning. My name is Michael Marsh, and I'm the CEO of the National Council of Agricultural Employers. Established in 1964, we advocate on behalf of agricultural employers before regulatory agencies and the Congress. Our members are farmers, ranchers, agents, associations, attorneys, and others whose business interests revolve around labor-intensive agriculture. Our members represent approximately 80% of ag employers in the U.S., and those that employ about 85% of the H-2A temporary agricultural workers securing visas each year. Our organization focuses on compliance. We collaborates closely with our partners in compliance in the various government agencies that have a hand in the H-2A program or are on the program's periphery, such as the Department of Labor's Office of Foreign Labor Certification and its Wage and Hour Division, the Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, as well as the Department of State. Also participating regularly in our meetings, labor forums, seminars, webinars, and other employment training opportunities are the EEOC, the Department of Justice, the CDC, the National Center for Farm Worker Health, and the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. Weekly, we have a teleconference with our H-2A committee from across the U.S. and from across the United States, and individuals using the program share experiences and get advice from one another on program compliance. On yesterday's call, we had 117 participants. Ag employers face several barriers and challenges in accessing the H-2A visa program. Primary among these are the program's complexity and its cost. It costs thousands of dollars for employers to navigate the process. Additionally, employers using the program are required to pay the workers wage rates disconnected from the actual market for agricultural wages. Shortly after the bilateral agreements were signed with the countries of the Northern Triangle during the previous administration, the Council began interacting with ministers of labor of El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, in addition to their embassies here in Washington, D.C. Early meetings, discussions, and presentations were held in person, evolving into virtual meetings over Zoom or in teleconference after declaration of the pandemic. However, we work closely with ministers and their teams, and they provide information regarding their nascent programs at our annual meetings and our annual labor forum. We understand they will be participating once again this year. Thankfully, we resumed our meetings in person, and during this administration, have collaborated with USAID and their representatives, along with the ministries and embassies, to identify barriers and challenges to employers for hiring workers from the Northern Triangle. Focus groups and discussions have eliminated those challenges and brought evolving new opportunities for overcoming them. For instance, while the ministries were successful in establishing registries for potentially qualified workers, there exists little infrastructure in country to recruit the workers identified in the registries. When vaccinations became required in order to transit into the United States, employers were concerned whether they could source approved vaccines for workers. USAID has been successful in eliminating several of these logistical challenges. However, the biggest barrier identified by U.S. employers in hiring workers from the Northern Triangle is cost. Airfare from San Salvador to Tegucigalpa or Guatemala City is far more costly than bus fare from Oaxaca, Baja, or Michoacan. The ministries have identified this barrier as well in their conversations with their members and have sought to source discounted flights from airlines. Housing H-2A workers can be a challenge, but it is a requirement of the program and at a cost borne by the employers. Communities are sometimes loath to have housing for temporary workers constricted within their jurisdictions, and employers have sometimes had to resort to buying or leasing hotels to house workers. The Farm Workforce Modernization Act that has passed the House of Representatives provides financial support for construction of temporary worker housing. Assistance in mitigating the cost differential will be one of the incentives that would be valuable for employers and improve the ability to hire workers from Northern Triangle. The H-2A visa program includes strict worker protections and labor standards. In fact, the last time I looked at IRS data, an ag employer using the H-2A temporary ag worker program was 3.5 times more likely to have a visit from an auditor or investigator from Wage and Hour than they were to have an audit from the Internal Revenue Service. The Congress has provided many tools to protect workers. Perhaps the Secretary should consider using some of the grant funding to provide education materials to H-2A workers regarding the robust protections that are provided. Recently, we have been alerted on our H-2A calls about threats, coercion, and intimidation of temporary H-2A workers by alleged representatives of United Farm Workers awaiting issuance of their visas in Mexico. Assertedly, while being housed in hotels, they received deceptive messages on WhatsApp demanding their attendance at a meeting in a separate location. Once at the separate location, they were provided union cards to sign in advance of their visa receipt and apparently told they were not allowed to come back to work again if they didn't sign the cards. Questions were met with angry responses, and workers reported they felt they weren't allowed to leave the meeting until the union cards had indeed been signed. One additional worker protection employers would likely accept would be a prohibition of these types of threats, harassment, and intimidation by labor union representatives, and assurances provided to workers that they are not required to join a labor union in order to be hired for or rehired for a temporary H-2A position. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at any time.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Okay, our next speaker up is Jerry from Rock Hill Honeybee Farms. Jerry, are you on? Okay, we're going to move on to our next speaker, who is Sierra Nelson. Sierra, we believe you are on if you want to come off. There you go. Hi, Sierra. You may begin your comments.
Good morning, and thank you for your time today. My name is Sierra Nelson, and I represent the Utah Wool Growers Association. I really want to encourage you guys to make sure that you look at individual industries separately. Strawberry farming, organic vegetable farming, these things are very important, and they're also extremely different from range sheep operations in the West. We love our H-2A workers. Without them, our industry would collapse. We try to find local workers, but there aren't that many people that are that excited to be on the range with the sheep all year round. And we find that our H-2A workers are not only very excited for the opportunity, but they like the work, they like being there, and if they don't, they just don't renew their contracts. A lot of our workers are multi-year and sometimes lifetime workers. One of the issues that we face with our H-2A program is there's so much red tape to get our visas passed through for our guest workers that it sometimes is not effective because of how long it takes. It takes too much time to get them passed through so that we can get them in. We need some special procedures for them. Housing is another one of our issues, because you need specialized housing for someone who is on the range with the sheep every day. It's not like they can go back to a permanent house structure on the wilderness. So we need to encourage you to look at the industries separately and make sure that there are special rules that govern each industry, because ours are very different than someone who's on the farm all the time right there. Hopefully we can get something in place that can cut through the red tape. One of the other things that we face is that they've changed the rules with our H-2A visas so that now you have to renew twice a year when you only used to have to do it once. So it's a lot more paperwork. It's a lot more red tape. It's a lot more waiting. When it should be streamlining the process, they're actually trying to make it harder. And that can be incredibly frustrating. Our food security is paramount to national security. We simply cannot allow our American food production to not be protected, which includes protecting industries like cattle and sheep who produce food and fiber in places where you can't traditionally farm. I really appreciate your time. If you have any questions, I'd like to chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sierra. Our next speaker is going to be Diana Padilla. And up after her is Dash Petaway, and following Dash is Jennifer Poole. I do believe that Diana is on with us today. I see you now. I will let you begin now. You're on the clock.
All right. Sorry, I had to change several computers because my camera didn't want to work. You know, as I was listening to everybody's complaints, I am a nonprofit helping farmers, and I am a farmer. So I hear all the complaints of no labor, and I also know that I don't have labor. But I also see other options that we really need to look at. One of the comments said we need to have U.S. workers. I think if we offered U.S. workers all the things we offer on the H-2, that maybe the U.S. Citizens would be, or the U.S. people would be interested in working again on the farm. So I really think we need to rebrand what it is to work on a farm. It's not bad. I'm an organic farmer, and it's very difficult to find people to work. They rather do roofing than to do farming, and it's same outside work. But meanwhile, we rebrand and we try to fix the problem for the US workers. We do need the H-2, but a lot of farmers like myself that are small or mid-sized, that red tape is really difficult. And the companies that are helping the farmers apply for these workers charge an enormous amount of money, which eliminates us from the opportunity to get H-2A workers. If USDA is focusing so much on building the small, micro, and mid-size, then they have to figure out how do they get the workers to come and work on these farms so that we can grow. Basically, that's what I have. I have some ideas. It's not what I want to share on here to get better workers, but it takes funding. And I'm happy to talk to anybody else off of here to give ideas on how we could maybe work it to rebrand and work with US unemployed people to get jobs and get paid as much. If you told me that you were going to pay me a wage without taxes, you're going to give me a home, you're going to feed me, I might think about working on the farm versus giving them a job and having them pay taxes. And they pay their own rent and, you know, so on. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you for those comments. Up next, we have Dash Petaway. Dash, are you on with us today? Okay, if not, we're going to move on to the next speaker, which is Jennifer Poole. And I see Jennifer, so you may begin.
So I'm Jennifer Poole, and I'm with the Virginia Agricultural Growers Association in South Boston, Virginia. We're a nonprofit organization, and we bring in H-2A workers to approximately 190 growers over the state of Virginia. And we have a lot of small family farms, and a lot of our workers have been employed for 20 to 30 years. We do care about our workers and like to bring back the same workers year after year, and they become like family to our growers. So we want to continue the program. Without them, our farmers could not survive. One of the things, so far as barriers and challenges that I find, is not so much the paperwork and the filing process, but it's currently getting appointments at the consulate in a timely manner once we get certified. So the consulates, the appointments seem to be filling up very quickly, and getting them here on a timely basis, so to not have any crops lost is a challenge. And so we need USDA to continue to advocate for us with other agencies. Secondly, with the housing, that's one of our biggest challenges, is that a lot of these family farms have older farmhouses, or either they've put up mobile homes, which, as we all know, over the years can deteriorate quickly. And some are in need of major repair. Some have septic systems that need to be upgraded and so forth. And it's getting tougher and tougher for our growers to compete and still maintain a profit margin. So it's certainly not any extra money there for major repairs that would probably cost anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 for some of what they need to do currently to their homes. And it's not that they don't want to, it's that they don't have the funds to do a lot of this, as I said, and still maintain any kind of profit margin. So definitely that is something that we think we could use help with. And I would like to see the incentives for employers, improved housing again, and that maybe USDA would look at ways to subsidize and ensure that we can continue growing these labor intensive crops and still maintain a profit margin. We care and value our workers, and we want to as well compensate them appropriately. But we do have to have some kind of profit margin, and everyone, including imports, we need to all be on the same playing field. So then so far as suggestions and how we could help, I really don't have a lot on the suggestions of ensuring compliance, except to say I really don't have any great ideas. We're already fatigued by the compliance reviews with food safety audits, GAP. The housing is inspected by our health departments, our local employment commissions, and we have all kinds of standards that we currently meet. So I appreciate you giving me this opportunity, and I hope you will take these comments into consideration.
Thank you, Jennifer. Up next, we have Curtis Rowley. Curtis, are you on with us today? Okay, how about Maricela Ruiz? Okay, we're going to move on down to our next speaker. For those who we have skipped, we will come back and circle back to them at the end of the program. So up next, Stephanie Smallhouse. I believe Stephanie is on with us today. We'll give her a second to get
Good
her
morning.
camera.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Thanks, Stephanie. You may begin.
Thank you. Yes, I'll keep my comments fairly brief. I just wanted to take this opportunity to express, first of all, appreciation for the effort in trying to relieve some of the pressures that are being felt in the labor situation within agriculture. Although we have expressed concerns with the difficulty in using the H-2A program for agriculture as a whole, any changes that might lead to a positive impact are certainly appreciated. I mostly wanted to speak specifically to the issues of wage rates requirements, and also with the housing requirements. As has been previously stated, the environment for agriculture at this point is very volatile in terms of costs and input costs putting into the crops that we're producing. And obviously labor costs are one of the most, labor and energy are usually the most expensive costs that we have in agriculture. and just wanted to express the concern that wage requirements reflect the fact that most of agriculture does not have control over the revenue stream that comes in. Most agriculture is growing commodities. We have existing issues right now in terms of access to labor. We know that H-2A is not a year-round program right now. It's only seasonal, so that carries its own issues, which are not necessarily a discussion today. But to add on to those issues in terms of the housing requirements, as has been previously stated, many in agriculture are living in very isolated areas that don't have access to being able to make the improvements that are required of the housing requirements right now. You know, just because a house is old doesn't mean that that it's any less accommodating than a new structure, and many times even more accommodating, to be honest with you. But many of our farms and ranches have issues with meeting the housing compliance.
Yes, is James Siller there? Yes, my name is Milton Lindsay. I'm a photojournalism student.
Hi, Milt. Thank you. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay, I'm sorry. Wasn't sure what was going on there. Back to my original train of thought. Basically, the housing requirements, there needs to be, as has previously been stated, perhaps some type of funding available to get houses up to code for maybe some of the more minor adjustments. I think that's a limiting factor in terms of many in agriculture even entering into the H-2A program because of the environments where we live, the isolated environments that we live in, and the ages of some of these structures. So as I said, I'll keep my comments brief, but I would just hope that this grant program includes some consideration of the challenges being faced currently by agriculture in terms of high costs and the overburdensome requirements which currently exist in the housing for the H-2A program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that feedback, Stephanie. The next speaker we have on the list is Maria Elena Valdivia. Maria, are you on? If not, we will skip ahead and circle back to you later. We have Kyra Wagner up next. Not seeing Kyra either, so we will circle back. Paulette Winfield. Okay. Javier Zamora. Okay, how about Matt Teagarden? I do believe we have Matt on. Hi, Matt. You may begin.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Matt Teagarden. I'm with the Kansas Livestock Association. We're a trade association representing livestock producers, as the name would suggest, in Kansas. That includes beef cattle operations, dairy operations, swine operations, and then also farmers, landowners, those types of entities. A couple things that I'd like to share. First, right from the top, the seasonal nature of the current H-2A program limits its effectiveness for agriculture. And that is because if you're feeding cattle or milking cows, taking care of hogs, that's a year-round task. We don't shut down for 3 months out of the year. And so there obviously are discussions around a year-round H-2A program. We're supportive of that and would encourage USDA and others to look at opportunities to look at ways to expand the current program at least until something else happens, find ways in which to use the current program, but allow some flexibility in terms of that seasonal nature. For those of our members who are able to use the H-2A program in its current form, we hear from them most often about the complicated process in applying to participate in that program. The requirements are onerous in terms of time, expertise, and costs. And I think it's been mentioned earlier during this webinar. There's what I would call fixed costs associated with participating in the H-2A program. And so that means that larger operations that have the capability of utilizing more H-2A workers can spread those costs across more workers. And so I think it disadvantages smaller operators compared to larger operators. But bottom line, those application requirements could be streamlined, could be made simpler and easier. We have seen too many cases, or many cases, where workers who have in their second, third, even beyond that year working for the same operation, for some reason get hung up in the renewal process. And whether that's consulate availability, not sure what all happens there, but it seems like if a worker is in the second, third, fourth, fifth year plus participating in the H-2A program, that the process of them coming back and returning to that employer, returning to that farm, to that operation should be easier than it is. And I mentioned maybe there's an opportunity for a multi-year approach where workers that are interested in a longer term relationship remaining seasonal, going back home for that period that the program currently requires, but a multi-year approach, so there's certainty both for the worker and for the farmer in having that labor force available. Finally, relative to housing, that was one of the things highlighted on a slide early on. And I think that to some degree, we have a little bit of the chicken and egg situation there with operations in rural parts of America, for us, rural parts of Kansas. And so there aren't, the population is low, so there aren't housing options for folks, in part because there aren't workers. And so if we bring workers in, there's not housing available. And so it's a little bit of which do you take care of first? Do you have the housing or the worker? And they kind of need to happen simultaneously.
Hi, Matt. Matt, we've reached the 5 minutes. If you just want to conclude for us. All right. Thank you so much, Matt. All right. We've also reached the point in the listening session where we will be taking a 5-minute break. So we will adjourn for 5 minutes and rejoin at 12:05 Eastern. Our next speaker up after the break is Dan Waldvogel. So Dan, if you can be ready at 12:05 Eastern, we will begin with you, and we'll see you guys after the break. Okay, it looks like it is 12:05 Eastern, and it looks like Dan is ready to go. So Dan, I will start the clock and you may begin.
All righty. Well, good afternoon to all of you on the Eastern Seaboard. My name is Dan Waldvogel. I'm the director of Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. We represent roughly 20,000 family farms and ranches in New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. Many of those are employers, but we also have a good number of agricultural employees as members as well. We do very much support a lot of the changes that are in the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, and do hope that the Senate makes progress in that in the near future. But regarding this pilot program, I think there are a number of things that could be incorporated to improve it. Part of that is creating just more flexibility. One of those aspects would be staggered entry, allowing H2A workers to be able to stagger their entry, entering the country and have different levels of contracts. For example, a lot of our fruit growers need a small crew late winter, early spring for pruning, but then they have a lot of downtime before they really need the rest of their crews. Another thing is those year-round visas. We find that would be extremely important. Also, the adverse effect wage rate and managing the volatility for that. First off, ensuring that we're really reevaluating the way that those surveys are conducted, but also having some level of circuit breaker within the AWR to ensure that year to year it doesn't change that radically, because being able to plan for a farm business is extremely important. The other part, I think, is on housing. We do agree that it is a critical safety net for workers to have employer provided housing. We are asking for some level of state block grants to allow employers to make changes to their provided housing, or perhaps in regions allowing for projects to be developed to allow employers to opt into regional housing projects for their workers. In addition, we absolutely agree that workers need to be included in this decision making. Having some level of democratic elected representation for workers is critical when making some of these changes. And we are asking for some type of program around a socially responsible incentive-based program, similar to the Fair Food program that started in Florida, that could work across the country and represent the diversity of agriculture per sector. But essentially that would be a voluntary, certifiable, market enforced and market rewarded program that would not only benefit workers, but also lift up farm businesses. If we're really going to make changes when it comes to enhancing protection for workers, it's critical to create more solidarity between farm businesses and farm workers. That being said, USDA's role in a program like that could be playing a little bit of a referee, ensuring that there is an easy way for workers to report issues, and then that there is investigation, and if relief is offered, that happens in a timely manner. Also, there could be additional incentives created through USDA, being that most farm businesses participate in a number of USDA programs. If they were in a program like this and in good standing, perhaps there's other ways that they might be able to be incentivized with some of the other programs that they're participating at USDA. Last thing I'll mention is recruitment channels. That is another critical part of ensuring that there is safety and not exploitation of workers here or in their home countries. Working with different governments is one avenue, but ensuring that there are safety nets, such as a reporting mechanism for abuses, is going to be critical. We hear from a lot of our workers of mistrust of some of the government agencies in their home countries. So building out a level of protection for them when it comes to recruitment, and having channels that are reliable and accurate to ensure that people are not being exploited here or abroad is critically important. So with that, really appreciate the time today, and hope you all have a good one. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. So we are going to be circling back to some of the speakers we had skipped earlier on. So we'll go back to James Bingham. James, have you been able to join us? What about Chad Carlson? Okay, Dan Fazio, I believe you are on with us, Dan. Dan, are you there? Okay, we will skip Dan and we can come back. What about Hector Gerardo? John Hawley, Jerry Matacio, Dash Petaway, how about Curtis Raleigh? Maricela Ruiz, Kira Wagner, Paulette Winfield, Javier Zamora, okay. I believe that is all of the folks who had registered to provide comments. We'll go through the list one last time. I think we maybe have Javier trying to connect with us. So one last time, last call for James Bingham, Chad Carlson, Dan Fazio, Hector Gerardo, John Hawley, Jerry Matacio, Dash Petaway, Curtis Rowley, Maricela Ruiz, Maria Elena Valdivia, Kira Wagner, Paulette Winfield, Javier Zamora. Javier, have you been able to join us? Okay. So we have now called upon all participants who have indicated they wish to speak during this listening session. As we wrap up, here are a few reminders. We do ask that all comments are made in writing on the Federal Register. If you'll take note, we do have those web addresses listed in the chat. The deadline to make written comments is October 24th, 2022. A recording of this webinar will be sent to all registered participants, as well as posted online to our website, which is also listed in the chat and on your screen now. We would like to thank you for your participation today and for all of those who provided comments. And with that, I believe we will conclude unless Anne or Ria have any final comments that you'd like to make. Okay. With that, we will close this session and thank you again for your participation.
Dana,
Yes.
I just got a note. I don't know, Sarah Nagu, if you are still on the line, but if you'd like to speak, we can certainly accommodate.
Yes, thank you so much, Ria. signed up to provide oral comments, but it seems that for some reason it didn't register. So I appreciate coming in at the last few minutes, and sorry to eat into everyone's lunch, no pun intended. My name is Sarah Nagareed with American Hort. I'm here representing nursery and greenhouse operations throughout the nation. Thank you for hosting this session today. Horticultural employers go to great lengths to recruit and retain U.S. domestic workers. Still, there are simply not enough domestic workers to fill all the available positions in agriculture. American Hort recently conducted an employment scarcity survey with UC Davis and Michigan State University. The results from our survey reveal that greenhouse and nursery farmers are facing significant workforce constraints and that current policies are failing to meet their needs. One solution to the crisis could be using the H-2A visa program to bring in workers, but many horticultural jobs are considered year-round, and the H-2A visa program can only be used for jobs that are temporary or seasonal in nature. 35% of the farmers surveyed used the H-2A program in 2021. Half of those who used the program reported that they had employment opportunities for H-2A workers longer than the current maximum of 10 months, revealing significant demand for a year-round or long-term agricultural guest worker program. We thank the Biden administration for leveraging opportunities like this pilot to address some underlying root causes that drive irregular migration to the US. Using the existing temporary worker visa programs as an avenue for advancing these goals can be helpful to our growers. Our landscapers and foresters have seen this done to a degree through a record number of H-2B supplemental visas released in May, and reserving a portion of the visas for Northern Central American workers. But with H-2A, it's trickier. If an employer uses the program, they already have existing relationships with workers and providers. The workers often act as a referral network for family, neighbors, and friends. Most come from Mexico, which is closer and more accessible. For these reasons, a pilot program of this sort without any significant changes to the current H-2A construct will render the pilot program useless to many growers in our industry. As referenced above in our survey results, one incentive or change we are seeking would be to provide employers access to the program for jobs that are currently precluded from H-2A by the Labor Department policy as non-seasonal, less than 10 months. We suggest that this program could define a period of admission, but the underlying job need not to be seasonal as DOL currently interprets it. We feel reassured that USDA would be the best agency to make this determination for this pilot, as USDA interfaces with farmers daily and is more connected with the work that takes place on farm. This would allow for greater program access for industries whose work needs are not seasonal, such as greenhouses, nurseries, dairy, livestock, and mushrooms, and presents a powerful incentive to recruit workers from these countries. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and our apologies for not acknowledging you before. And it does look like we have Javier on. Javier, would you like to start with your comments?
Oh, sure. Wow, that was super fast. Sorry, I wasn't, I actually have some TV people here. Wow, are you there? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Javier, we can hear you.
Oh, yeah, okay. Kind of wanting to know what a farmer does and what their life is like. So it's beautiful. So I guess my comment is, I think one of the issues that we're facing as a small family farm to house our H-2A workers, which are down there, it's housing is not available, and what's available is super expensive. I can tell you that I have 16 of them, and one house is $3,600 a month. The other two are $2,000 and $2,000, so $1,000 per room. But in order for me to build some housing, there is so many rules and regulations, and the money is not really available there for me. Or if it is available, it will be, taking a $2 million loan that I'll probably be dead and I won't be able to pay. So we need to really look at the small family farms and how can the FSA and the USDA help us, deal with this housing issue that has making it almost impossible for us to house our workforce. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Javier. Okay. Again, I think we have been through all of our registered speakers. So with that, we are going to conclude this listening session, but I do want to remind you once again, we have some very important links in the chat box. First, our website, which is fsa.usda.gov/farmworkers. There you will also be able to find links to the Federal Register and also to the e-rulemaking portal, which is where you will make your written comments. And those are due once again by October 24th, 2022. So even if you made comments orally today on this session, we do ask that you also make those comments in the e-rulemaking portal, which you now see on your screen as well. And with that, we will conclude this listening session. Thanks again for all who participated and those joining us today to listen. Thank you and have a great day.